Good morning, welcome to the studio. We are going to paint a few things today, from just making random marks with beautiful colors right up to using our brush strokes to create a little floral piece. Okay, and we are using one sheet of paper that is cut up into 4 pieces, which will closely resemble your postcard sizes. Let me get them for you. So they look like this. I just used the top sheet of paper I had available, and then I noticed one of them actually had old work on, and that doesn't matter because we are just playing and relaxing a little bit today. So I'm also using the 24-piece Sakura Koi set and a number 6 student grade brush. Alright, let's head on to our workspace where our water and our blotting paper is ready. Alright, as you can see, the Sakura Koi 24 set, water, blotting paper, 4 postcard sized watercolor pieces, and I thought we could start off with a little mixed background like this. And this lovely sunny streaks are coming through my window, so let me just adjust that quickly so that we can have a solid background color. That was easy enough. So is it still bright enough? Let's have a look. Alright, now that's perfect. Okay, so all the color on here was done with wet in wet, and you can see some lovely blooms forming. Alright, and then some gentler transitions between the colors. And as always, you can choose your color palette. I am maybe going to stick to this violet bluish with a dash of green maybe. And then I want to show you something else that I did some other time. This is also wet in wet, but I don't wet the page beforehand. I actually use one wet puddle and move into the next wet puddle with fresh paint on the brush. So let's try that for today on one of our pieces. I'll set aside those and just work on the one for now. With a nice wet brush, gather some color. On the side I have my little mixing palette, and I'm just creating a little puddle of color there. And our other color is that purple. Oh, that one came out nice and juicy. I have to admit that my palette was wet prior to recording, as I went from one project to the next. So that's why mine activated so quickly. But you can prepare your palette in advance as well. Alright. Some more water so we can have a nice juicy palette. There we go. And then a little bit of green. Ooh. Right, now you guys know me, and you know that I adjust my colors quite often because I don't like that real Crayola look. So I'm going to use the colors that I've mixed up to neutralize or adjust some of the other colors. So for the purple, we can use a dash of that green just to take that sharp edge off of the vibrancy. You can even, on off-cut pieces of watercolor paper, just test out the colors before you actually commit to your piece. So that can be as easy as grabbing a little spot or a piece of paper and just testing out what your color looks like. So let's grab that. And just for interest's sake, let me show you what it looked like before. So it was a little bit pinker, and this time it's more dulled down a little bit. But you can always use that. You don't have to dull it down. Okay, and then just a drop of purple into that green will also bring it to a bluer shade. Alright, so that's what we've got now. And this is what we had without the... So still equally beautiful, except it's not as sharp. And by intermixing those two colors together, you actually have a color palette that flows better as well. So let's see this one on its own. And if we add a dash of the green, it will take it to a greener value. And if we use that same color and add a dash of purple, we move it slightly to a bluer side. Now these four colors fit in with each other much better than the three colors on their own. Alright, that's just one way you can adjust your palettes if you want to. Okay, so I'll use these mixed up colors for our wet into wet, and you can soak up the color onto your brush and make a mark, and just dry that brush off on your blotting paper and grab the next color, touching the previous one, and you can make a brush mark. And this way you can go back and forth between the colors, transitioning easier because a little bit of them are in each other, if you know what I mean. So they do transition better than, say, if you had one color and then immediately try to add an additional color without it being mixed up first. So let's just add and add until this little piece is full. If you want to, you can go right over the edge. I'm not going to do that today, as I do want a little bit of a border that I can work with later. You'll see sometimes I don't even wipe off the previous color. I just go back in and grab some of that. Okay, so next up, let's use a little bit of imagination and create an imaginary landscape. So these are the colors before they are mixed together. Now I'm just adding a little bit of whichever one I feel like. So I'll have two different blues, one with a dash of green and the other one with a dash of the purple. And then we'll have a nice puddle of purple. And I'll dull it down with the blue this time. Look at that. It's like a cobalt violet. Alright, and with that same brush, I'm just going to scoop some water and adjust that one with whatever was left on the brush. Okay, so a landscape has a little bit of land, of course. Let's make the land purple. So the color is in the tip, and this part is either just damp or it has a very small amount of color. That's how you get that dry brush effect at the bottom. So that can give you the effect of the glistening sun on the horizon, or on water if you want. So I'll use a little bit of watery color with a lot of water on the brush and just a little bit of color tipped into there. So those dry brush marks will sort of peep through as a layer at the bottom. Alright, these are purely from imagination, and I want you to also use just your imagination. Don't follow along on a reference picture. Just use your imagination and play around with this a little. So I want to darken up that very far background by just adding a few watercolor marks in the background, just to deepen it up a little bit. And before I do some trees, I'll just take water on my brush and wet the background. You see the water is kind of dirty already, and create a wet background. There can be a few puddles if you can see them. That will be okay, because I want our clouds to form naturally on the page. So this is my cloud color, or the sky color between or behind the clouds. So we'll carve out the clouds with negative shape fill-ins in the background, so that you can see the clouds appear on their own. And sky is normally darker on the top area and lighter at the bottom. So in the bottom I'm almost not even adding color. I'm literally letting the color that's on the page flow into that. And those wet puddles I'll just leave to play. If you need to add in a cloud, you can take a dry brush and soak up an area, just like that. So before it dries, soak it up a little bit. You can even take a piece of your blotting paper and crumple it up so that it has uneven edges, and then lift up some of that pigment on the wet areas. Alright, next up, maybe this one doesn't lend itself very well to a tree line, so let's just make more mountains. Now for that I'll take some of our greenish color and just put in a little bit of a mountain range in the distance. It doesn't have to be perfect. A little bit more here and there. So I like the composition where our edges fall into a focal point. And then I'll also darken up the edges a little bit again. To create the illusion that we are looking at that point. So, some more green. Same there. I'm letting it blend in with parts of that watery landscape. There we go. So we have clouds, water, few mountains. I think I'll leave it just like that. So, can we make a little abstract scene? Well, not a scene, well, let's see. Let's see if we can use our wet in wet technique in a stripe form to do a little bit of a stripy experiment. Grabbing some color and just putting it in the center of our wet lines. Okay, and with the blue I'll go into the dry area, touching onto the wet. That will give us the effect of that wet moving into the other wet area where the purple is. And a solid line where the colors meet. Well, a solid line where the color meets the dry paper. Adding some water where some of the edges has dried, just to help the pigment move, but I'm not fiddling with it, just touching some water into that area. Like there's also some dry spots there. Just take some of the water and just wet that edge again. I kind of like that pinstripe look. Alright, let's leave that one to dry as well. And lastly, let's do some flowers. Simple, easy little buds. We can use purple, and remember all our buds come together in the center, so you'll have leaves coming from the outside moving into the center. You'll possibly have some stems moving across the page, and then of course a couple of leaves. Alright, first let's draw our petal shapes with water. Making sure they come together with a thin meet up point to the center. And then you can take your purple, or if you want blue flowers, you can use your blue flowers. And I'm simply going to let that water and pigment play with each other, and you'll get the best results if that was very, very watery. Alright, leave that for a couple of minutes to soak in while you draw your next one. You can leave some open gaps, see, like there and there, just to give some interest to each petal, so it doesn't look like just one solid petal hanging around there. Alright, all the wet edges, again pigment, just drop it in and move it about, spreading it into the little petal shapes. We'll add some more color later. We're just having some fun right now. Alright, next one. So you can go ahead and fill your whole little sheet with that. Make different little petals and different flower shapes and sizes if you want. In some of the drier petals, the color just won't flow there, so I always use the analogy of rivers. Your pigment will flow where the water is, so we'll make a rivers with the water so that our pigment can go there. And you can help them move along into areas where you want them to sit. And each of your little blossoms will look different and have a different feel to them, depending on how much water there was and how much pigment flowed in there, where you placed it, and all kinds of things that you can learn from playing with your paint. Sometimes you'll have accidental discoveries, and that is the best part. It's when you discover something on your own. You can make them really loose or really stiff and full. And while all of them are still wet, you can literally use a fully loaded brush with a leafy color and just stamp out some leaf shapes. So we're not manipulating the brush in any way. We are literally using that brush shape to press down. If you have a point press or a full length press, you'll get different sized leaves as well. And like I said, this is for play and practice to see what your brushes can do and how you can get used to working with your watercolor medium. Now there isn't very much color variation in here because we sort of had them work with each other, and you can try any of these techniques with any color you like. The idea is to experiment and have some creative fun. Alright, I'm going to use the leftover blues to add a little bit of a center into each of my flowers. Don't want a solid blob, but I do want a little attraction to that center. There we go. Alright, hope that was helpful and that you discovered a few new things with your watercolor medium and how to manipulate water and help it to flow to different areas to create different effects. Alright, well, I'll see you next week. Remember to like, subscribe, and keep on practicing.